Okay, welcome back. When we left off last time, I asked you to answer these questions on your own. What is the law of conservation of energy? Well, as I've said, all the laws of conservation say the same thing. Whatever it is not lost or gained, created or destroyed, but it can change form. So energy is not created or destroyed, lost or gained. It can change from one form to another. What are energy conversions? It's when energy changes from one form to another. This is what people do to get things done in the modern world. And we looked at a simple example of the pendulum as it converted from potential energy at the top to kinetic energy at the bottom, and it was mechanical energy in between, and the total stayed the same. Okay. What types of energy can be involved in energy conversions? All of them. Okay. So we can take chemical energy and turn it into mechanical energy or thermal energy or electrical energy. We give two examples, not from your notes, of energy conversions occurring. Okay. A bird converts chemical potential energy from its food to sound energy when it sits on a fence and sings its song. Okay. So it would also, we could say too, it has mechanical energy because the bird is a system, and it has thermal energy because the bird is warm. Okay. A log in a fireplace got radiant electrical magnetic energy from the sun and stored it as chemical potential energy during photosynthesis. That is now being released as thermal energy and light, which is a form of radiant or electromagnetic energy. So when you think about what happened, it came as electromagnetic energy from the sun. It was stored as chemical energy, and now it's being re-released as electromagnetic energy in the form of heat and light. And we're going to take a look at some of the energy sources that we use. And the first ones we're going to take a look at are fossil fuels, which are non-renewable sources of energy. So they're the remains of ancient plants and animals that lived on the earth millions of years ago. Again, those plants and animals got their energy from the sun. Okay, if you remember the food web from last year, okay, the sun shines on the plants, the herbivores eat the plants, and then even the predators who eat the herbivores, their energy is traced back to the sun. So whether it was an ancient plant or animal that died, that energy originally came from the sun. Okay. Energy converted with the law of conservation of energy. So again, we're releasing that stored energy that came from the sun, but it's not lost or gained, created or destroyed. The form can change, but the total amount remains the same. Fossil fuels are non-renewable energy resources formed, as I was just explaining, from the remains of ancient decayed plants and animals. Non-renewable means that they cannot come back or be replenished naturally as fast as it's used. It took millions of years for this stuff to form. So when we use it up, it's non-renewable to us because even if new plants and animals were dying now, it's not going to be available for millions of years. So it's not going to be renewed in any time soon enough to count. Burning fossil fuel converts energy from chemical potential energy, which is stored in the bonds, and again, it's energy that originally came from the sun, to heat and light. Chemical energy is very concentrated compared to other forms of energy, so like in wood. So sometimes kids say, well, like if we ran out of fossil fuels, couldn't we just power things with wood? The amount of energy that comes out of burning wood is nowhere near as concentrated as the energy that comes from fossil fuels. So we would end up cutting down all the trees in the United States in a very short amount of time, and then we'd have nothing. Okay. Okay, right now it's cost effective and cheaper to use than some other forms of energy. This is changing. The renewables are now often the same price or cheaper than the fossil fuels. Okay, the first fossil fuel is crude oil or petroleum. So this is what we dig up in the ground when we pump it out of oil wells. When it comes out of the ground, it's this thick greenish brown, highly flammable liquid. It looks more like tar than it does like anything that we can actually, use. So it's definitely not ready to use when it comes out of the ground. So they have to separate it. So remember we said that mixtures can be separated, and the process used to separate these mixtures is called fractional distillation. So they take this crude oil, this tarry, thick, gooey stuff out of the ground, and then they boil it. Basically, they heat it until the different things that we want evaporate. And then they condense it in the process of distillation. So the gasoline is evaporated out of it, and then it's cooled, and it condenses into gasoline and kerosene and motor oil and diesel fuel, okay? And we also use crude oil or petroleum to make plastic. It produces a medium amount of pollution when it burns. Natural gas, okay, is fossil fuel formed from plants and animals, okay? It contains more energy per kilogram than petroleum or coal. So it actually has the most amount of stored chemical potential energy in it per unit, and it burns more cleanly than the other fossil fuels. It's the cheapest and best fossil fuels. It produces about 38% of the electricity in the United States. So you think about like people who have gas stoves in their houses or gas heaters, or if you go to a warehouse, a lot of times the forklifts are powered with natural gas. It burns clean enough that you can burn this stuff inside without killing everybody, without releasing a bunch of carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide, which, like if you were burning something with gasoline inside or kerosene, if you were burning the petroleum products inside, of course, you can't do that. Everybody in the house would end up being dead from the fumes from the being released during the burning of gasoline. But if you have a gas stove and you have a propane stove, you can run that inside and it's fine. So this is a very clean form of energy. There's a few slides that I want to take a look at on petroleum. Okay, so one of the problems with getting the petroleum up out of the ground is moving it from one place to another. So this is a picture of Valdez, Alaska, and there was an oil tanker called the Exxon Valdez, and captain ran into something and tore a hole in the bottom of the ship and it released the crude oil. And you can see the black, like I said, it's this black tarry kind of stuff. Okay, and it got on the ocean and it suffocated a lot of the marine life or poisoned them. So here's an example of this dead whale was killed by the oil spill. And this picture, they're trying to clean it up. So the beach is supposed to have white sand on it, like any beach. And so it's covered with this tar and the crude oil. And they're basically using power washers and steam cleaners to try to get the oil off of the beach here. The people who lived here, a lot of them make their living being fishermen, and obviously you can't be a fisherman when everything is covered with oil. So this is a picture. You can see what the sand is supposed to look like, and then they're trying to clean up this incredible mess. And then these are some of the birds that got into the oil. Of course, when it spills or when there's an accident like this, it causes a lot of devastation to sea life. This crab, this bird, it's covered in oil. This is an otter. He was covered in oil. Also, as we use up these non-renewables, we're having to go farther and farther away to try and find them. So the oil that came from the Valdez, Alaska, which was the pictures we were just looking at, comes from a pipeline that goes all the way across Alaska. And so, as we've had to look for oil in more difficult places to find, and it's like any kind of mining, when you first start using it, you find it in the easy to find places. So Pennzoil, there was a lot of oil in Pennsylvania and in Texas. And then It's been harder to find. We have to look offshore in the ocean and in more remote places like Alaska, and then move it in pipelines. Ships and take it to where the United States where we're going to use it. A lot of people worry about these pipelines going through the middle of the wilderness. They're hard to protect. And if there's an accident also, they could spill crude oil into the middle of Alaska here. We saw the mess it made along the shoreline. Some people worry about terrorists. This is going through, this is wilderness. It'd be easy to stick a explosive on the side of the pipeline and blow a hole in it and interrupt the energy supply to the United States. And this shows where the pipeline goes in Alaska. We have some pipelines in Virginia. One of the things about these pipelines, everybody always thinks there should be a pipeline someplace else. But when it's going through a proposed pipeline is going through your own backyard, and people are like, no, we should build a pipeline over there. One of the pipelines that's been in the news is this Keystone pipeline, which is proposed to bring shale oil from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico here, where it can be brought to refineries. And there's been a lot of controversy about this pipeline, whether it's cost effective to build it. It goes to some Indian reservations. And so, again, it's the kind of thing where people who live there are not so much for it, but other people who aren't going to be directly affected by it are like, yeah, I'll build it there. It's another picture of the proposed Keystone pipeline. The third fossil fuel is coal. Okay, it's a solid fossil fuel made from just plants. Okay, it produces more pollution when burned than petroleum or natural gas. It produces a lot of pollution. It produces about 23% of the United States' electricity. It's used just to produce electricity because it makes so much pollution. People used to use it to heat their homes. They would have coal delivered to their houses. Coal has a lot of uranium in it, so it makes people sick. It also produces a lot of pollution when it's burned. And so when people would burn it in their home, eventually we realized that you couldn't put in enough pollution control devices in a house to make it feasible. So pretty much the only place it's used now are in big power plants where they can put in what's called scrubbers to clean it up. If you've ever seen the movie Christmas Story, Dad is constantly going down into the basement and he's yelling at the furnace and some black soot comes out through the vent. That's because they have a coal furnace. So that was back in the day when people would have coal delivered to their house. Okay. All these sources of energy will run out because they're non-renewable. Okay. Maybe 50 years of oil, natural gas, about 50 years, coal, 70 or more years. It seems like we keep finding supplies of coal. Pretty much the only thing good about coal is that we have a lot of it. It's a mess when we mine it out of the ground, and it produces a lot of pollution when we burn it. All of the fossil fuels produce some kind of greenhouse gases that are a leading role in global warming and climate change. I put together these slides, and I want you to pay attention to coal and coal mining. So as I said, it was like we only use it really in power plants. This is a picture from the beginning of the 20th century when coal was burned pretty much in everything. It was burned in people's homes. It was burned in factories. You can see the amount of air pollution that is coming from this picture. It's pretty horrific. This is a picture in China. They use a lot of coal to produce electricity. And so the air there in many cases tends to be very polluted. In Beijing, which is the capital when they were going to have the Olympics there, the government actually shut the electricity off to a lot of the people and just told them it was tough. They needed to get the air cleaned up. A lot of the athletes didn't want to go there. She is not wearing a mask because of coronavirus. She's wearing a mask because the air is so polluted. It's another picture in China. You can, this is in the middle of a sunny day. You know, all this stuff is from air pollution. And this is a picture of the capital of in Beijing. Again, the air pollution is pretty intense. There's actually a story in one of the cities in China. There was a factory that caught on fire on Friday afternoon, and nobody knew it was on fire all weekend because the air was so polluted, nobody saw the smoke. It was actually, it was in this city. You can see, like, you know, something was burning over here. It's already, the air is already so smoky. People just did not see the fire until they went to work on Monday morning. It's like, hey, look at that place on fire. So, you know, coal does cause problems. This is a picture that was affected by acid rain. When coal is burned, it releases a lot of sulfur. The sulfur mixes in the atmosphere and it makes sulfuric acid. When it acidifies the soil, a lot of plants can't grow in soil it's acidic like that, so the trees die off and it kills things. It also damages statues like this. You can see the erosion has been sped up on the statue of George Washington from the acid reacting with marble. This is a picture of a miner getting coal from under the ground. This is a very dangerous process. If he breathes in any of the dust, people get a disease called black lung. It's very deadly. So, you know, and these mines are also dangerous. Sometimes they have collapses and people get trapped down here. There's mine fires and explosions that kill people and causes mines to collapse, also trap some of the miners sometimes. This is a picture of what black lung looks like. This is a cutaway of a healthy lung. And then, you know, a little bit of coal dust, and then this is what black lung looks like. Like I said, it causes cancer, it leads to death. This is a picture of where they're surface mining. And as I said, when they start at the top, you know, there was a forest here, and when you scrape off all the ground, anything that was, you know, living in this ecosystem is gone. So it is environmentally very disruptive when they do this. Also, you can see they tried to control some of the runoff, but, you know, when it rains, the coal dust runs down and, you know, they try and catch it in these ponds and stuff. But sediment is very hazardous. It's filled with all kinds of dangerous chemicals. Sometimes it gets down into the groundwater and ends up in people's wells. It makes them sick. The cleanup from this is often very expensive. This is another picture of a surface mine. You can see, you know, everything is gone. And you can imagine when it rains how much runoff of mud and different things from coal mining there is. This is another picture of a surface mine. Again, everything that, you know, was part of the ecosystem is gone. We're going to stop here. I want you guys to answer these questions, and we'll pick up here next time.